Good day, everybody. Welcome to the May Dalim Tips and Tricks. As our tradition has been, we're going to do the May is going to be a duo recap. Just going to cover a few of the things that we went over at duo. A little bit of this is repetitive. I'm going to show a couple of things in ES itself, but mostly it's going to be slides. I do want to say the duo was pretty well attended again this year. It was in Denver. It was a nice venue. I had my doubts that we would have the attendance we wound up with in Denver, but it was really good. Rick Darnell did a great job as the president, putting together the content, kind of changing things up a little bit. So I think we have good momentum for the duo group, and hope everybody can be there next year. I think right now Nashville looks like it's in the lead as the next site. So if everything works out, that's where duo 2019 will be, is in Nashville. So, with it, obviously the thing that Dalim was covering the most was the changes in ES5 changes they've made in soft proofing, asset management, security things they've changed with distributed environments, monitoring, and just supporting latest standards. So some of the new stuff that you're going to see in the dialogue engine itself, within ES5 is a calibration check to do closed loop color inside of ES, barcode reading annotation, which we've covered before in one of our webinars, channel order and opacity changes, so kind of keeping up with the features that were there in the Java version. They've now got the channel orders and opacity settings inside of the HTML5 version, and ability to collapse multi-page PDFs. Also, with the new HTML5 viewer, it does support iOS, Android, and Surface, and including touch gestures. So this is the first part of the interface that's going to be fully compatible. They're moving towards getting the rest of ES also compatible with the mobile devices. So, gamut warning and the Sentinel check are two of the new features inside of ES5. I'm going to go over those. Also, this is a feature that's been in dialogue for a while, the ability to float a window, but you now can actually compare and also view it color corrected. So I think before, in previous versions, it wasn't a color correct view of the file, but you can basically pop it out and view it. So let me go ahead and go inside of ES itself and show a couple of those things. All right, so I launched files inside of dialog inside of ES5, and notice now on the images, a little bar here. One thing you can do is compare any of your images with the other image. So it doesn't have to be a revision, for instance. You can actually just compare, and this is going to be terrible comparison because the images are completely different, but there's your align, or you can do the analyze and show how different the two files are. So you can take any two files and compare them to each other, side by side, or however you want. You also can actually take it out, open an external window, and this is just going to be a free window that is dialog. So you'll see it's going to come in high res. I can zoom in, I can move it anywhere I want. So if I want to compare color, just to making sure that maybe all the images inside of a story for a magazine all have the same color tone and match really nicely, you're able to do that inside of dialog in color correct environments. Let's see the gamut stuff. Let's see if I get my image here. So you have two different gamut checks that you can do inside of ES. You have, first is the monitor. So this is one of the new things, Color Sentinel. It's going to actually tell you what colors your monitor in calibration is not able to display properly. So maybe I need to go to a better monitor, or just what I have, but it lets you at least know that you're not viewing that color correctly. And you can also do a gamut check on the simulation profile and what colors are out of gamut on the simulation profile. And we'll go back in the slides and see what else I wanted to show. Show that. And I think we covered all the other stuff that we were going to show with that. So, another thing inside of ES5 that's new is going to be the multi-site concept. I covered this a bit in one of my other webinars as well. I think it was the one we did after the Worldwide Technology meeting. The benefits of the multi-site concept, or even inside a single site, is the ability to dedicate renderers and hard workers to specific customers or specific sites. So if you're setting up an ES and it's kind of maybe a SaaS that you're setting up for your customers, you're reselling the services to your customers, you're able to create sites for each of them and dedicate the resources to those sites. And that can be file servers as well, besides the renderers and hard workers. So it's a good move by Dalim to do that. It was requested by a few customers, and it's already in production in Europe and a couple of customers here in the US now. So some of the new digital asset management things that Dalim's working on is the custom components. We covered those in a webinar we had, where basically the plugins, being able to design your own plugins, add functionality inside of ES. Check-in, check-out is actually working now using Latitude. We've had the feature in ES5 before, but it was pretty much hit and miss. And kind of, I think at one time got removed, but it's back in and it does work as it's expected to work now. Compatibility with the plugins and CC 2018. They've improved the search engine, and they've incorporated deep learning inside of ES5. So I'll go over that in a second. To show you what we're talking about with deep learning. So if I just grab some of my files here. You notice I'm using kind of the search because a lot of the improvements have been in the search area. So I'm going to kind of show some of that and what they've done with the deep learning. So if I select one of my images here, you notice in the Dublin core, all of these tags were not part of the image. This was part of the deep learning engine that Dalim incorporated inside ES5. It's built into ES5. It's not going out to it with an API out to a third-party source like I know Google offers the services, but their engine is inside of ES5. So you can see it gave it just specific tags, basically a taxonomy in a way, and going to different images, obviously different tags, automatically tagged inside of ES. More that they've added with the search, just to show, is you're able now to limit the search down to specific folders. So if you notice, I have 469 documents here. This is our demo server that got rebuilt just a couple weeks ago, so we don't have a lot of images on here yet. But we have 469. But if I want to see just what's on file system and not inside of customers, I can check file system there, and it's searching just inside my file system. We're now down to 442. If I know a specific file system I want to search, I can turn the other ones off, only search inside my S3 file system, and see it's 327 files there. And I can go down to whatever level I want, just in the damn folder. For instance, down to 180. So it's a nice feature. It's been asked for, and they're able to do that. And if I just unclick them all, basically it searches all of ES again. Similarity is one of the new features that they've added in. And what you're able to do with similarity is, and let me pull up some images. You're able actually to take an image, pull it into similarity comparison, and it'll find images it considers based on the deep learning engine similar to that image. You have kind of a threshold here, so if you want to narrow it down closer, you can just drag and start finding images that are close. Now we tried to kind of dig into this to find out exactly, what it's using, whether it's the subjects that we just saw, but it actually has an index that's numerical, and you'll see here, so it's not really human readable, but that's basically the similarity, metadata that it pulls in and uses all this information to reference what's inside of the files and then compare them to each other. And that's kind of what you're honing down with the threshold. I played a little bit with threshold. Don't really know the rhyme or reason to, how exact it is, what it's actually filtering through. But basically, it is a slider. You're able to play with it and just, broaden your search criteria. You'll notice that anytime I do any kind of filtering like this, it's adding a filter here. So if I want to get back up to where I was, I just turn that filter off, turns it, or you can hit the reset button. Then you also have colors, which can be used. So if I come in here and find an image I want to use, same thing, I drag it in, and based on the colors inside of the file, the swatches that you see here, it's finding images that have similar color balance in them as well. Again, you can broaden the search, pulls in more images. Or if I want to take an image like this, bring it in, again, it's going to find all that are close to that by a threshold. But if I'm only want that kind of the red tone in there, I can turn the other colors off, search based on that red with other files that have similar colors to that red, and tighten up the search. And you bring it in to the colors you need. So if you're looking for colors, images that have a nice color balance that work well with this image, it's easy to find those now. There are a couple of tricks that you need to know to set up your ES5 for the deep learning. One is there's a metadata set called page information that has a property that doesn't exist, at least not to the latest patches that I've tested, which is the beta patches at ES5.5. So you have to create this metadata property inside of page information called score, and make sure the type is flip. So you can set that up, all lowercase score. Then inside the same metadata set, page information, there's LCH color. That exists already, but basically what you have to do is add score on the bottom piece there. Then one thing I found missing in mine, and I'm not sure if it's missing, and I don't think that all the ESs have this, but you'll notice in similarity, the SM property, that needs to be created, and you need to make sure it's there and it's set to string. Similarity should be there. Also, I think between Mike and I think there was some discussion on whether similarity needed to be capitalized or not. It should be capitalized. I think I've seen ESs that it's not capitalized. So you want to make sure it's a capital S in similarity on the metadata set. Then inside of your production parameters, your default parameter set, or your process parameters, your default, or you can create another one if you want to use deep learning just for a specific customer or whatever. But you need to make sure that preview color extraction is on for the color similarity stuff, and preview use deep learning is on. When you turn those on, you will have to re-index the search database. Warning on doing that, of course, especially for really, large ESs that have a lot of files, that can take some time. And not only does it take time, but when you do it, it really wipes out your search database as it exists. So it's rebuilding it from scratch. So you won't be able to search on files until it's rebuilt, or you'll see some files coming in little by little as the index gets rebuilt. So just something to remember. And also, when you do the reindex search database, basically you're just adding this information back into the index. Existing files will not have the information in them unless they go back through preview generation. So you might just want to do a user action that runs files that you definitely want to use, or folders that you want to use, and run them through a user action to just redo a preview generation on them, or reprocess them if you can, if it's not a complex workflow. For the customization stuff, the plugins, one thing I don't remember if we had mentioned before, so I added it in here, is the site API dalim.com is now basically linked to Dalim's Confluence, and is much better documented, much better kept up. So they're kind of keeping up with it. It's pretty up to date from what we've seen. We've found a few things that aren't documented yet, but Dalim usually has reasons for that because they don't want people playing with it yet. Inside of ES5 is the new user experience in the workflow editor. The workflow editor is going to be the first of the things that are kind of going to go to a new interface. We like it overall. We did notice a couple of things with it. There is a little bit of a slowdown when it first goes into launching it. So you see kind of it pauses a little bit, doesn't come up as quick as the old one. This actually came up quicker than I've experienced before, because I was probably in here a little bit earlier. But just some of the quick things is you're now able to zoom in, zoom out. So if you have these really large workflows like a lot of our customers have, you can actually go in. Link editing is much easier. Everything's here on the right, organized well, so it's not little pop-up windows and things that you can't use easily. We'll probably do a full webinar on a lot of the features. I don't want to kill a lot of our time going over this, but one thing to note is they have gone to JavaScript now. If you have workflows that use Java in them, they will import, they will work. You will be able to look at the Java, but if you're trying to make a new one, it's only JavaScript as an option. Not much difference from what I've seen in the workflows. I'm not a developer, I don't play with it that often, but from what I've seen, it works pretty well. It's things that we like inside of here, is definitely the ability to do things like group creation. So you can highlight a few tools, create a group of those tools, then expand or contract that group. So you're able to combine tools, really clean up your workflows well. You're able to use a grid if you want, kind of like the workflow editor inside of Twist. You can display the grid or turn the grid off. Change the grid settings if you don't like them. You can stick to the grid or not. You can fit the screen, select groups, steps, links. Much nicer, much easier to use and navigate, and definitely a lot easier to create workflows. You're also able to put new steps in just by right-clicking and then going to your group of what you want to actually put in there. Is your new tools, and be able to link those tools up to each other easily. But we'll probably spend a webinar, but Alex did a good job of going over this at Duo itself. But with our time restraints, I don't want to spend too much time doing it. Some changes in Twist they talked about. As we know, Twist is a pretty mature product. We're not seeing tons of changes with it, but something that it's been around for a while now, probably about a year, but is the Twist editor is now a standalone application that you can install on Mac or PC. You download it from your twist server by going to the 8080 address and downloading it, and it can hook and work with the one editor can work with a standard twist or an e-twist. It automatically detects which one it is, and then lets you log in with your credentials. And the look and feel once you're in there is basically the same as you're used with either twist or e-twist, depending on which one you use. The good thing about it is you don't need the JNLP, which keeps getting locked down by security settings and at some point won't work anymore. In fact, on my laptop, it doesn't work anymore at all. But tools that they've modified inside of Twist now is the GMG link and the All1 Color Hub. They've done a lot of work with both those tools, integrating it with the latest versions. For version 5 of GMG, version 6 of All1. GWG Preflight has been updated to 2015 standards. It now supports SFTP as a protocol in the transmit tool. E-twist workflows allow you to set priority now, which we didn't have before. Normalize has been updated some, and new algorithms for shading, and they're always updating when they do a major release, like the trap engine, to fix some of the trap problems that customers have had in the past. Christoph Bindler did a presentation that he's done now a couple of times at Worldwide Technology Meeting and now at Duo, where he talked about what Dalim's doing to be able to be used easier in the cloud. They're doing a lot of testing with Amazon. In fact, if you were there and you got to see Christoph's presentation, you'd swear that Amazon was probably paying him, because he's got a lot of their slides, a lot of information. He's really dug into, deep into, AWS, what it offers and the benefits of it. In Europe, Dalim has set up a couple of very large customers on AWS. There's a few here in the US, but most customers in the US are using more like data center cloud services, not necessarily AWS. I prefer the data center cloud services as well, just because I have more control that I'm used to. It's more like cloud atmosphere that I understand a little bit better. AWS is kind of a little bit of a learning curve, but we've done a lot of testing with it ourselves. I'm just more comfortable still with my data center. You talked about the license distribution for Dalim products, and you can see here that 62% of Dalim products are now running in VMware, to only 31% in bare metal. And I think that 6% he's got for Apple is probably a bit high, because I think there's only 2 customers in the US left at all on Apple running as a server. But you see how those numbers have changed over, since 2013, and increased where almost everything's in VMware. VMware does include just any cloud instance, so AWS installs are included in the VMware numbers that he put. And again, Dalim is doing more and more to support S3. So inside of ES, you can now set up even your composite folder, and any folder like that can be set up to look at an S3 volume. From performance standpoint, it feels great when you're actually just using, if you've already got files in there. It is definitely a little bit slower if you've imported files, uploaded files, I should say, and then that preview generation process does take a little bit longer. But it is using basically the API to talk directly to S3 when you do this. The URL is just placed like you see there, and you can just set up any of your groups. Like in this case, my composite on my VMware box is running, on my Fusion box is running off S3, because I don't have a lot of drive space for it, so I just run it off S3. And just to break that down, and the password and user are modified, those aren't real. But basically, the URL that you use to make the composite looks like it is at the top, which basically breaks down to basically your user is that AKI group there. Your password is then a long string, and then your server the first part of the server before the first period is basically the name of your whatever they call it inside of S3. I'm drawing a blank right now, but basically it's what you named your instance inside of S3. Then US East 2 that you see there, that is where you're running the region you're running your S3 on. So US East 2, I think, is Virginia, or at least was Virginia when I'd set this up a while back. So you need those pieces, you need to understand those pieces to actually build the URL properly. One thing to note on the password, we've run into this and Dalim has, that string that is given by Amazon sometimes has characters that do not work in a URL. So it sometimes trial and error, you're going to might get slashes or different characters that just aren't going to work in a URL string, and you just will have to regenerate that encryption. To set up an ESFS volume, it's going to be a window that looks like this. So again, the server information in there, the username, password, any folder that you have inside, you can actually search, here. So if you want the root level, you just go /. If you have a folder inside, you put it here. Something new with the latest beta patches of ES is monitoring should be working now. Until now, monitoring was not working with it, but when you turn on the monitoring button, you're going to get this Q name, and your Q name is basically the name here and the folder under it. So if you don't have a subfolder, you're just going to put the same name that is the first part of here up there. And then everything else works fine, like if you do revisioning or update metadata and document, that all works. They don't work. They're doing their own revisioning like we've always been used to. We're doing R1, R2 appended to the file name that really exists in the file system and just not showing you that inside of ES. But we talked a little bit at Duo, or at least I did with them, of whether they're going to start using the revisioning that S3 does natively inside of it, because it can do revision management as well. They hadn't thought of it. They're not doing that yet, but they're definitely going to consider it. For security, Christoph Bindler broke into, and this is something that he's kind of started to really talk to customers a lot about. This has been in the last couple of Duos in the Worldwide Technology Meeting, where Christoph does a good job of kind of talking about security, how they're handling security issues. They do deal in Europe. They do deal with a couple of large banks as well as the printing company who prints the euros. So security has become a very large issue for them. So what you're seeing is just keeping up with the latest Tomcats, using Java 8, restricting their server recommendations, and they're definitely promoting the use of HTTPS in the documentation. So they're keeping the documentation up to date on the best ways to secure your ES. They're using now SSL certificates for Latitude. Before, Latitude didn't use those, but now it should be a correct SSL certificate for it. They found some cross-site scripting issues that they've addressed. And they've also included inside of ES5 improvements in the password string policy. So you can set your password string policies inside of ES now. What they're going to look at in the future is going to Tomcat 9. They keep working with companies on intrusion testing and locking down servers more and more, working on even improved recommendations, and also coming up with better recommendations on the Apache web server configurations. And we had Frederick from Dalim do a couple of different presentations. He talked about basically using ES as a dam and the benefits of it. So I just threw a couple of slides in that talk about what he spoke about a little bit. He's done this presentation. I believe he's got it on YouTube. If you are looking for it, I could try to track it down and send you all a link if you email me. He talks about ES being the hub where, the cloud security, everything inside of DAM is all kept inside of ES. You have the one source to go to your images and do your production. Because of Fredericks' work, but Frederick comes from a photo studio background. Anybody who's been around him and knows he takes, many pictures everywhere he goes. He's got millions and millions of pictures. But so he's worked a lot with the developers of ES to make improvements to working with photo studios, doing, working with Capture One on the photo capture side, doing the production inside of ES, and even the distribution on the back side. We have a couple of large photo studios that are customers even here in the US. We're actually working on a few more. So it's a great path forward for what they're doing inside of ES, and it's really become a valuable tool. I wanted to mention again, because Frederick did mention this, that the 2017 Dalim Bakeoff, Dalim was the winner of that. So as you see that, ES is at the forefront, is one of the top DAM products in the market now. Pretty much the only knock that Frederick has run into a little bit on some of the shows, everyone loves the performance, the features of ES. The GUI gets knocked a little bit if they're looking at the old GUI, the flat design, and some of the desktop stuff that can be done has definitely improved that. But sometimes it's hard to show those in a bake-off in kind of a prepared thing like that. See, this is when he got announced as the winner. When you look at different DAM products, I thought this was an interesting slide he showed. It just kind of shows you where Dalim is positioned here on the pretty far right-hand side, where it's sophisticated, highly scalable products. So, they've done a lot with it. I mean, if you remember, basically, the DAM functionality was very minimal originally. It was really just a production tool, but since we had assets, you could start searching them and kind of evolve from there. We have a lot to thank for Frederick for doing that kind of stuff. Christoph Romer showed a little bit more of what Dalim has been working on from a project management standpoint. He hinted at this a little bit last year at Duo. They have a lot more of it baked, and it is targeted as a feature for ES6, which should be in beta by December. So things that it's going to bring in are ability to do delegation. So if someone is out of the office, his work, all his approvals or milestone approvals can be delegated to another user or multiple users. So the user can kick that off, or a sysadmin can set that if it's an unexpected absence. Then they're bringing in a few more concepts inside of ES for the planning, which are task, workflow, resources, and Gantt charts. So Gantt chart's going to be the planning tool. You'll be able to use it just like you do in any kind of project management piece where you're building Gantt charts. You'll be able to relate tasks to other tasks and include the resources with those tasks, and really map out how your project's going to evolve, the time frame it should happen in. As delays happen, because we're actually tracking them inside of ES, whether we got files, whether this milestone's been reached or not, it can dynamically move and change the planning, or it can be manually done depending on how you set it up. So for users, you can define things like working hours, use custom calendars for customers or users. You can define extra hours, off hours, all of that inside of ES. So sorry, kind of hurried through all that. So definitely going to be a great tool for our customers. Definitely, we've had quite a few projects where we've kind of needed this. We mimic it as much as we can with milestones and some of the smart views that we use, but it's nowhere near being able to view a Gantt chart and dedicate your resources, allocate them properly, do checking into jobs, checking out of jobs from a time standpoint, and tracking all of those. And to wrap up, has kind of become the tradition for Dalim. The mad scientist Jacques did his one more thing. He's kind of started what he's kind of started to do is he's actually made this quite educational. He's actually doing it almost from a professor standpoint where he teaches us about something specifically. In this case, it was semantics. Last year it was deep learning. We got a really good introduction into deep learning and what it was and how it worked. And this year it's semantics. And he went through all the different organizational systems of semantics, going from an uncontrolled list all the way up through a semantic network, ontology, taxonomy. What he focused on was a thesaurus. The reason he focused on a thesaurus is basically it's relation of words to meanings, right? So you have multiple words that can have the same meaning and even go between languages inside of it. You can also do associations with a thesaurus, where you're associating a mouse with an elephant. So today, we basically just have taxonomy and metadata searches inside of ES. What hopefully will come by ES6, and he didn't really promise a timeline on this, but we'll have basically a bag that is a thesaurus. So you'll be able to import a thesaurus, like in this case it was a media topic. You can do countries. There's several sources for different thesauruses, ISO 25964, different things like that. And it'll give us the ability to manage them, edit them. So if you don't like the relationship, you'll be able to change those inside of ES and basically use, a thesaurus. So if you're searching for, if you search for cars, anything that matches cars inside of the thesaurus will also come up. So you don't have to have that strict definition of what you're searching for. So we're definitely looking forward to that. It's nice already that we have the deep learning engine that's actually automatically tagging. Some of those tags, though, can be a little bit non-human readable or unusual, depending on where they're picking them up from. So the source will help that and help us get the searches we want. Frederick then again did another presentation talking about how ES is used for packaging. So just kind of going through a couple of those slides. He just showed some examples of packages. Of course, they have their water bottle package that they always have at the different shows, and he showed basically how it's used inside of ES and how ES is basically, again, the center of the supplier portal, packaging artwork. So you have InDesign users, the art people using ES. You have translation going inside of ES, enrichment going on. So it's the hub inside of very large projects. So kind of wrapping up a little bit, wanted to, usually a lot of times we tend to zone out a little bit with the guest speakers, but I thought all of them this year were pretty interesting. Aaron Linzow is a motivational speaker, and he did a great presentation where he talked about his journey in Antarctica for 3 months, hiking and skiing to the North Pole, and tied it into business experiences, like having to overcome obstacles and dealing with problems as they come up. He did a wonderful job of really showing how your business can use the same kind of concepts that he had to go through. And I thought it was an excellent job, and I wanted to give him credit and put it up there and mention it. If you're looking for someone for a company, do a motivational speech at a get together, he's a good guy to contact. Really great job, really nice guy. We also had a presentation from Quark, which was interesting. A lot of people have zoned out on Quark, but they kind of caught up everybody in the room on what they're dealing with, and they're doing a lot with content automation. You could almost tell it seemed like he mentioned QuarkXPress, of course, because that was their core product that everybody was familiar with. But where it has gone, he didn't really get into as much as jumping into what Quark itself is doing with the content management and omni-channel publishing. So definitely worth a look. I thought it was a pretty interesting presentation and definitely something I want to research a lot more. And that was, so let's see what questions we got. All right, so first question we have is, of course, the cost of the planning. Dalim hasn't worked it out completely yet, so we're not positive. The thought they have right now is that basically it'll become part of the enterprise project tracking. So people who have ES that have enterprise project tracking, which most of our customers do, the planning should go along with that. Again, we're not positive. Graham wouldn't commit to that. So you can send Graham an email if you're really curious and want to nudge him on, make sure it's going to be in there. The only other question I got right now is about whether S3 is compatible or is able to be used inside of Twist, I'm guessing with the transmit tool. So right now that's a no. I did ask that question and myself in the little training that we did before Duo. They don't have it in there, because SFTP is in there now, but no S3, which can be a little bit problematic for customers if they want to use S3 inside their ES, because not all our customers place their files through an upload directly to S3 or directly through ES. A lot of our customers actually place their files going through a Twist workflow in the transmit tool that places them, in a directory structure. If that is a need for you, there is a way to do that. Basically, there's a virtual image that you can download from Amazon. I'm trying to remember the name of it, but it fails me right now. But you can contact me for more information on it. It's basically a VM you can run that will mount S3 natively itself and then share it out as an NFS volume. So as an NFS volume, you can mount it on your Twist servers and file stuff. The storage appliance is pretty nice as well, because basically if you allocate some disk space to it, that becomes a cache. So when you're copying files to S3, basically through the storage device, you're copying it to a disk on that device that's on your network, and then it uploads it to Amazon. You can also run it in AWS itself. Of course, they charge you for the virtual machine in that. And I think that was all the questions. So on that, remember our webinars are the third Wednesday of every month. So we don't have the agenda yet for the June webinar, but as soon as we get out with that, we'll get the mailers out to everybody. And again, if you have ideas, a good idea for a webinar, please send that to us. We have gotten a few requests that we should be incorporating in the next few months. Okay, I hope everybody has a great day, and we'll talk to you next time.